Hi, I'm Dr. Brenda Wade. This is part 2 of our series on protecting children from sex addicts and protecting children from becoming sex addicts themselves. Why? Because those two things are connected. In part 1, we made the point that 72% of sex addicts were themselves physically abused, 81% were sexually abused, and 91% of sex addicts were emotionally abused. And that most sex addiction starts in adolescence, not in adulthood. Why? 11% of children are exposed to pornography by the age of 11. Now let's move on to what are we going to do about this problem. The key is to remember that any form of addiction is a brain syndrome, and it comes from exposure to trauma. Those 3 traumas I just named: physical, emotional, sexual trauma. Anything that traumatizes a child overwhelms a child's defenses because they can't think their way through it. They don't have an adult brain. The brain's not finished till we're 25 or 26. I bring you back to that point all the time. Now, what are we going to do? Children who are sex offenders, juvenile sex offenders, used to be locked up as if they were just, a criminal. And what I want to say is most acting out behaviors of a criminal nature have a root cause, which is some form of trauma, some form of abuse. And juvenile sex offenders need to be put in juvenile rehabilitation centers for juvenile sex offenders. And there are a number of them, fortunately, around the country. The University of Washington had the first one some 20 to 25 years ago. So they exist. 12-step programs, very helpful because there's support. Everyone follows the 12 steps to healing, and there's a spiritual component that is extremely helpful. So those children begin to lead their lives from a much higher level of consciousness. Number 3, it's important that parents, you take a look at how that child got exposed to physical, emotional, or sexual trauma, whether it was in the family, whether it was someone outside the family, whether it was at school. That has to be solved. Children can't get better if they're in the same milieu where they were hurt. They have to either be removed or that family has to be in family therapy and heal. Now, speaking of therapy, all children who are suffering need a therapeutic alliance. They need someone who is trained to work with children to help them. Now, the final thing is that you must remember that most abuse is caused by intergenerational cycles, that there's trauma in the family. So it's time for us to look at our families as units that can protect our children, but only if those families get help. So that's a lot. I want you to remember the family needs help, the child needs help, the child needs to be kept safe first and foremost, and that help is available. I will have a resource list posted on our website. You can go there and take a look. Follow me if you want more information. I'm Dr. Brenda Wade, your Modern Love Doctor.